So today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't exactly have a step-by-step tutorial for you, as I'm actually going to be making something from scratch and kind of experimenting with the details and seeing what comes about of it. Like, this is normally how I make my clothes. I don't normally follow patterns or a straight line of when I'm making something. I'm very experimental and just kind of figure out the details as I go, which probably freaks out a lot of people and isn't industry standard. But this is just how I self-draft my own clothes, and then normally when I share a tutorial, that's when I figured out the exact steps of how I make it, so then I can share it in a way that makes sense. But I thought it might be interesting to uncover like how I go through this trial and error process to figure out like what suits me and how I make it, as this is something I feel like a lot of people could take on board in when they're making their own clothes, if they get to that stage where they can just start coming up with an idea and then just starting to make it. So not for everyone, but it could be inspiring for some, so I thought it might be worthwhile. So this week particularly, I have got a friend's wedding this weekend. I am horrible at leaving everything to the last minute, so it's literally a few days before the wedding. I have been thinking about this for months, have known what I'm going to make, but I'm just a horrible human and have left this last minute. Go me. So what I'm going to be making is a dress for that. I've got the material, I've got all the sketches, and now I'm just going to talk you through the process of how I kind of get this idea out of my mind and into a wearable garment. So first off in the process, what I do is I figure out my body and like what I know works with it and kind of the vibe that I want to go for. So I know that for this I want like an elegant style, so therefore I got a dark burgundy silky kind of material. I've worn this color countless times before and I know it just suits my skin color and looks nice, and I know that with the silky material, like whatever I make, it'll just have that little touch of elegance. So that's how I figured out like the color. Also, I just went to the fabric shop, literally the fabric store in Brisbane, and just because they have such a beautiful range, and I saw this material and just fell in love with it. So that's also what to consider as well. Like, you might have a color you have in mind, but also like what is available at your local places. I then knew that the shape I wanted, I really love high necks and long sleeve vibes, kind of almost like a kimono, like Japanese style. That might be very wrong, but that's how I envision it. Like, I've got back knee scars and I know that it flares up every now and then, and I'm very sensitive about it showing, so I really want to cover that up, especially for an event like this where I just don't want to be worrying about that being exposed. Like, when I'm in the right environments, I really don't care about it, but it's something like this, I don't want my skin to be showing for bits that I'm sensitive about. I know I shouldn't care about people judging me for my external skin problems, but that's life. I also hate zippers and buttons, so I'm just going to do a tie neck feature. That way it can like easily get in and out of the high neck vibe, covers up my back, and it just ticks all those boxes. And then because I have that high neck style, I wanted to balance it out with just like a shorter length, because then I feel like if you have long length, high neck, kind of longish sleeve, it just looks a bit too conservative, which is nothing wrong with, but that's just not the vibe that I'm going for. So keeping it nice and short. I'm also keeping in mind, like, as much as it is a formal event, I don't really like having things in my wardrobe that are just for formal events, because I don't really have many formal things that come up. So I want the ability to be able to wear it later, which we'll be able to see when I end up making it, and like how it can be reused down the line. So once I've mapped out what suits my body, the occasion, and just like all these practical details of what I'll be making, I then go on like Pinterest, Instagram, grab magazines, whatever I need as a source. I'll then just go through these and start mapping out like a bit of a mood board for inspirations of details. I'm not trying to find the whole garment that I'm making. I'm just trying to see like these things that I have in my mind that I think I like how do they come up in pieces that are already made. Once I've mapped out like that goal, I'll then get a sketch pad and paper, start drawing out the actual dress that I'm making, just so I have a North Star. These don't have to be amazing sketches either. Sometimes it's just like a random scribble, some notes next to it to remember. So then once I've drawn out the overall dress, I then start to draw out the actual panels that I'll be sewing together. So knowing that I'll have like one front main piece, the arms, the two back sections, and the two front and back sections for the bottom skirt area. And that just helps me figure out how many pieces I need to measure and what is going into making it. So once I've got all that mapped out, I figured out what I'm actually making, and then get some paper that I can draw the patterns out onto so that I can then cut and replicate what I need to make. So I'll show you through the steps of how I then start assembling it into a piece that I'm going to wear to my friend's wedding. Obviously, coming up with something in your mind, you don't always have a piece that you can then go replicate for remaking this. So what I do is I try to find something that's quite similar that I know the measurements fit me and I can kind of use to map out a piece. So I actually got my Essentials shirt, available on the website if you want to join the Essentials Club. And I laid it down and I knew that this is like, I want a shirt top. All I'll be adding is a high neck and larger sleeves and a skirt. Like if you kind of can map out this like starting point, that'll help you figure out what you'll be drawing out. So I took it off. I actually folded it as I know that I'll be cutting on the fold, and I just drew around the armholes, this side section and all of here, because I knew that that fit well. So then once I have mapped out all the measurements for each of the panels that I'm cutting out, I will then obviously trace out those bits, cut them out, pop them aside and get them all ready for when I start sewing. I then lay out my piece of fabric and start pinning the pieces of paper that I've cut out on top of there. And I make sure that when I do this, it is laid out in a way that is resourceful, so there's less wastage, everything is kind of like from one corner over to the other, or at least just like a jigsaw style where it fits into one another. So there's not too much fabric left as scraps afterwards. Once I've laid it out, I then start cutting each piece out and obviously start putting that aside ready to start sewing. I then figure out kind of like the steps of how I start making it. So for this one, it made sense to start assembling the top and making sure that everything fit all right. I started by joining the front with the back. Then once I was happy with that, I then started adding the sleeves. And then I had a bit of like a tunnel fabric that I could use to add to the neck and tie for that section. Ideally, I wanted to have the neck area longer and exaggerated and the arms actually longer, but with the amount of fabric I have, I didn't quite get enough, which means it wasn't exaggerated, but it ended up being cute, so I'm more than happy with that. But that's the good thing about having your pattern all laid out and figuring out where it fits on there. You know like what needs to adjust and like what can stay the same. And like I knew that the body and the dress like couldn't change, that had to stay the same, and the arms and the neck were adjustable. So that's a part of the process of just like being adaptable and evolving and just kind of like brainstorming when you come to a bottleneck and figuring out how to overcome that. I ended up realizing, because I started making the top first, I was like, oh, this is cute, it's a top. I can therefore wear it again later. If I keep it separate, I'm just going to add a skirt bit underneath it. So I continued making the skirt separate, and then I just wore it to make it look like a dress, but it's actually a skirt and a top, which ticks the resourceful thing. It was very comfy, very practical. I think it came together really like cute and elegantly, which was nice. But essentially, yeah, that is my very quick overview. This took me a day all up, just going through the process of like mapping it out, experimenting, putting it together, figuring out that the initial vision wasn't exactly what I wanted, and kind of like trying on, coming up with a new solution and then going along with that new solution. But yeah, I'm actually very happy with how it turned out. I can't wait to add it to my wardrobe. I'll show you a little snippet of how it looked in action at the wedding. I got a few really lovely comments about it. I got to be able to say, oh, I made this, and I literally had finished it that morning of the wedding. So annoying. But anyway, that is just who I am. And I got to be like, oh, this thing, I just whipped it up this morning. I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of like what I follow to make my own clothes from scratch. It's not for everyone. Some people enjoy having a pattern, which is why I share the steps of tutorials, but this is essentially my process of how I come up with my own garments and then share it with you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, give it a like or subscribe if you want to watch more of these things. If any inspirations came from this, comment below, let me know, or if you just have anything you wanted to add on, I'm all ears. But have a lovely day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the upcoming videos.